Hello, everybody. My name is Natasha Phipps, and this is our December real estate social. So, since COVID time, so 5 years now almost, we have been doing these monthly, well, for the most part, monthly online investor social events. And our goal is to share what we can with you, make your investing journey a little easier, and also share what we're learning out in the marketplace and what's going on out in the market here in Alberta. This evening, we're going to be focused on the commercial multifamily space, which I'm really excited about, and is something that I know all of you are also excited about. Up until recently, I was the only licensed commercial realtor on the team, and now we have a few of us. So Andrea Tessier, my partner at Phipps Real Estate Group, is licensed on the commercial side recently. And Heather, I'm not sure if Heather's joining us. Is she here? No, she's not here. No.
I'm here.
Um, Heather, as well on our team, has also passed her course, and Erin is underway. So I think moving into 2026, I'm really excited about being able to grow that side of our business. We have obviously always focused in the investment space, and this is a really exciting progression for us to expand that side of the business as we move into 2026. So this is just a little taste, hopefully, of what's to come. But the goal of this session here is to give you some good comparisons of what you need to know when you're um, interested at getting into the multifamily space, or even if you already are into it, there might be some good lessons learned here and things I can share that might make your journey a little bit easier. Just a little bit, about me and kind of how I learned this as well is I've been investing in residential real estate for the majority of my investing career. So started back when I was 20 years old. I'm 43 now, but going back several years ago, really wanted to try to move into the multifamily space, as many of you want to as well. And so most of what I can speak on is what I have physically gone through myself, which the lessons learned, things I wish I would have known, all of that experience definitely benefits our clients. I have been licensed as a commercial realtor for my entire career of 18 years, but most recently in the last few years, starting WellShare Real Estate Trust as the CEO of that, I have had really good hands-on experience that I know is going to benefit our Phipps Real Estate Group team and grow that side of things. So we're here to help you. We are here to also help you if this is for you or not. I talk to a lot of people who invest in a lot of different things, and it's not always right for everybody. So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight as well. But the goal of this evening is to really just compare these two things and give you a really good fundamental basics of getting started in the multifamily space. So you'll see on the screen there our contact information, our website, and our private Facebook group, Calgary Real Estate Investing. I urge you to join it if you're not in there, and as well as our Instagram handles are there if you'd like to connect. Okay, so what is the difference? Just starting with the real basics. What is the difference when we're talking about residential real estate versus commercial multifamily real estate? The term commercial is a broad term. It includes other types of real estate than just multifamily, but we're going to focus on multifamily here this evening. And really, what the difference is, or where you see a trigger, is it comes down to the number of doors on a property. So a fourplex generally does not fall under commercial lending environment, and five or more doors generally does. So that's the initial sort of like trigger. Now, there's always gray area. I've certainly seen investors get residential lending on a fiveplex or a sixplex. But generally speaking, going much above that, you are looking onto the commercial side of things. And what you're going to hear this evening is the commercial side of things is really related to the lending environment. It is very much a game and strategy on lending. And so we're going to talk a lot about that. But why is it relevant in the Canadian real estate market as real estate investors? I think in the last several years, there has been several factors that are making investors a little more interested in this space. Usually, the first thing that triggers the interest into the multifamily space is possibly you can't get any more residential mortgages. You do run up against a barrier at some point where you just can't continue to grow maybe the way you want to. And so that does usually start a conversation with your broker potentially of what other options there might be. So that is a major one. Also, just as you're growing a portfolio, you're trying to achieve more economies of scale. But also the lending environment on the residential side of things, it has just gotten more and more challenging. And it's going to continue to, as we know, there's even more changes coming here on the residential single family side of things. And so, if you want to kind of be growing in the current lending environment, at some point, often you are having to kind of take a look at this and see if this makes sense for you. As well, there's been a lot of press around the housing crisis in this country. We're gonna try hard not to go into too much politics here, because that is a very political topic. But it does matter, and politics do play a role, particularly in the lending environment with CMHC on the multifamily side. So we are going to talk about that later. But I think a lot of Canadian investors want to, be problem solvers. Real estate investors are very good problem solvers, and that has piqued a lot of people's interest. And so, understanding the difference is just that very basic sort of definition. So, as I talked about types of multifamily real estate, we tend to often think about apartments, like apartment style multifamily buildings, but there has been also a um, popular sort of strategy, which is bundling townhouses or bundling single family houses, which you can't really do anymore with the new CMHC guidelines. But over the last 5 years, you've been able to bundle different types of property types together. So it's not just apartment style units. We're also talking about it could be a block of 20 townhomes, for example, when we talk about multifamily. And what we're not going to talk about tonight is the commercial side of things, where we're talking about office, retail, hotels, and all of that has a very different, obviously, strategy and lending environment than what we are talking about here this evening. Okay, so the first thing, as I mentioned, you often come to this commercial side of things because of the financing. And recent years, of course, let's talk about the last 5 years, high interest rates, more and more challenging to borrow money. Soaring costs with everything. And so you really kind of have to start sharpening that pencil and seeing how can you make these deals work. And so understanding the financing process when we compare it to residential is going to be really the first thing to understand. So when we talk about residential real estate, most of us are pretty familiar with that process and what that looks like, and it's relatively quick. And there's honestly not that many variables in it, and it's the more traditional route of lending that you would be used to, even for your primary home. Now, on the commercial side of things, it is way more complex. There is moving variables all the time. There's changing variables, and there's just a lot more variables in terms of how your property is valued, what you can borrow on it. And then there's additional risks like CMHC policies changing, processes changing, higher costs of doing your due diligence, and all of those things require more capital. So the theme of this evening definitely will be going into the multifamily side. It's just it's a more capital intensive plan, and you have to be okay with that. And you also have to understand when you're doing your due diligence, you may spend more money and walk away, right? And we have to be okay with that, because we want to be able to obviously get the answers that you need, but you also have expenses that are going to be significantly higher than doing a home inspection, for example, that you might be used to on the residential side. So a lot more complex, and a lot more reliant on the financial model. Whereas on the residential side, when we are doing we have a single page pro forma that we use here at the Phipps Group for residential, just analysis, and that works pretty well. But that same pro forma does not work super well on the commercial side of things. So let's talk about some pros and cons of residential as a quick review. So single family real estate, Pros are, you can easily establish steady rental income if you have good property management in place. It's a lower barrier to entry. However, that barrier is climbing, right? The amount of Canadians that are even owning a primary home is significantly going down in this country. So, but in comparison to multifamily, it is a lower barrier to entry, possibly depending on your lending environment. Lower price tag. Now, the cons of it are the scalability is usually a challenge. So if you want to have 20 doors, having 20 single family properties, that's kind of a con. It is hard to be efficient with 20 individual properties in 20 different areas. And so having some efficiencies over on the multifamily side does start to become appealing. However, one pro that I did kind of jump over is if you had 20 single family homes, you also have diversification. So if you have 20 homes in, across Alberta, for example, what might be happening in Edmonton versus what's happening in Calgary, you could see some diversification there relatively easy. Whereas if you have a 20 door building in a community in Calgary, all 20 of your doors are in one location and are at the mercy of whatever that area or community is doing at the time. Vacancies as a con can have a much higher impact on a single family property. Now, we talk a lot about secondary suites here, and we love secondary suites because they do provide two streams of income in one single family home, but that's kind of all we can do. In Edmonton, I know we do have single family homes that have suites and carriage houses, and we're going to start to see some more of that here in Calgary as well. But it is more impactful on your performance when you have a vacancy on a single family home and on your returns, of course. The financing limits are one we already mentioned, and this is the most common one that I find. And we're going to talk more about financing, but that is a con. Interest rates as well has been a big one. High interest rates in the past 5 years have made it really challenging to make the numbers work to find good, consistent cash flow on the single family side of things has been very challenging. One of the reasons why the CMHC insured commercial mortgages are so popular is that interest rate is driven by the bond market, not by our Bank of Canada rates like we see on the residential side. So that has been challenging. And investors on the single family side have maybe had to put a little bit more money down or look outside their backyard or be a little bit more creative with strategy to make the numbers work on the single family side has been a little bit more challenging because of that in recent years. Okay, so on the commercial side of things, the pros, of course, are, and what I think people are hoping to achieve is a higher income. They are wanting to maybe replace X amount of income with their real estate investing, and this may be a quicker path to do that on the multifamily side of things. Of course, we talked about scalability. That really should say scalability and efficiencies because the more properties you acquire, the more doors you have, the more efficient your expenses become. So insurance is a big one. I mean, we've all seen massive increases in insurance. And this is one where if you're doing your analysis, even on single family real estate, what the seller, for example, might be paying for insurance does not necessarily mean you are going to pay that for insurance because that seller may have 20 other properties and they're getting a blanket program. So insurance is a big one though, that as you scale, you will start to see the benefits of those doors, of course, management as well. And other expenses like repairs and maintenance, that kind of thing. The more you can offer these services, the better pricing they will give you. And then a pro, of course, is being diverse with income sources. And what I'm referring to here is not just obviously rental income, which is a big one, but on the multifamily side of things, things like parking, storage, pets, any efficiencies that you can create to improve your net operating income is a huge bonus in terms of the multiplier effect. So the largest difference between the residential side of things and the commercial side of things is how these properties are valued. And in my opinion, that's a pro. I should have had that there under income potential because it's usually what I talk about the most is your property's value is driven by the net operating income, what the cap rate is doing in that area. And your net operating income can really be influenced by how well you are taking care of your property, how well your property manager is doing, making sure you are controlling expenses and maximizing rent. And so those kind of little things that may seem like small, like parking, pet fees, you utilities, if you can capture any of those back, really do have quite an incredible multiplier effect in terms of valuation when you look at your net operating income. So those are huge pros that I like. And we're going to talk about the financing pros a little later. But just from a overall high level view, that is something that I definitely like. Whereas on the residential side of things, your property's value is driven very much so by whatever is happening around you. So your neighbor across the street, what they sold their home for, significantly impacts what your house might be worth. And on the multifamily side of things, it's not like that in the same way. It really comes down to your net operating income. So, what are some cons? There's certainly a lot of complexities that start to become apparent when you start looking at larger assets. It's also not just about property management anymore. You're also thinking about asset management. That becomes a little bit of a different conversation. And you likely as well have a higher initial investment. I know there's already people going, yeah, but what about the MLI Select program? And I will talk about that. But you absolutely need to have higher capital requirements to get into the multifamily space safely, in my opinion, and reduce your risk than going into the residential side of things. So higher initial investment, you need to be able to tap into a larger amount of capital. And cons as well is the research timeline, the due diligence timeline can be quite long. You're waiting around a lot for underwriters to get back to you, to the brokers to get back to you, to CMHC to get back to you. And it's also a very different world in terms of how we operate. In the residential side of things, like most of our team were, available days, evenings, and weekends. And in the commercial side of things, it's like 9 to 3, Monday to Friday kind of thing. It's a very different space that way, less urgency out there in the entire marketplace. And so that combined with things just taking longer, of course, you're going to be investing a lot more of your time in terms of doing some due diligence on the property, and then it may not work out, right? So longer timelines in every step. Of course, higher fees to acquire. And what I mean by that is the lender fees, the broker fees, your appraisal fees, environmental fees. All of those fees are significantly higher than if we were comparing it to, buying a single family home, where really our only acquisition fees could be a appraisal, an inspection, of course. And if you have condo docs, you might review those as well. But that's usually not a huge investment of time or money. And usually your time invested on conditions in single family is like maybe 7 to 10 days. So whereas on the commercial side of things, we could be talking about months, and often we are talking about months. So just knowing what your ability to invest time is going to be really important. Okay, so let's talk about the financing process. And I chose this picture on purpose. The roller coaster of the financing process is very real. I feel like you can certainly tell the individuals who have gone through this and have not when you start having conversations with them, because it is definitely this roller coaster effect and feel. And we're going to talk about why that is and kind of what to expect. So, what are some pros and cons here of the financing process? First one is costs, and there's a wide range of costs here, which is why I didn't put a specific number, and it really does depend what type of lending we're looking for. And generally speaking, the more urgent, the kind of less desirable, the higher those fees are going to be. So if you need urgent approval in a short period of time and you need a quick turnaround, you're going to pay significantly higher fees than a standard commercial mortgage. Timelines, of course, like we talked about, are a big one. But the broker's role is, in my opinion, extremely important from day one. I find a lot of people that we work with, sometimes in this space, they're not involving the mortgage broker until like later on, once we've found something, something's under contract. And we like to kind of do the opposite here is we want to really form this team. And one big difference on the financing process and the acquisition process, in my opinion, to do this right, is to really establish that team and then we go out and get to work because of all of these reasons when it comes to timelines, costs, and the amount of time we all need to invest is really solidifying that team at the beginning. But number three, there, the point of your broker's role to advocate in the financing process. This is huge, even more so than on the residential side of things. And I think it can be a big shock coming from the single family world over to the commercial world, how different it is, how your broker really has to sell your capabilities. They're not just selling a deal, they are selling you and what you're capable of, what your resume is, what you're bringing to the table. And so your broker needs to really believe in your success and be a really there to advocate for you and your success every step of the way. So having a team, having your your realtor, your lawyer, your entire team and structure set up in advance, and that gets presented to the lender is going to make you look a whole lot more put together and professional and ready to execute than kind of scrambling at the last moment to get all this together. So the financing process is about all of those things. It's not just about kind of let's get an approval. But really, where it comes into more complexities on the commercial side of things is due to variables. But let's just highlight CMHC for a moment. I'm going to talk about them more. But there is the complexities around CMHC are substantial because compared to the residential side of the lending environment, on residential for your primary home, if you want to get an insured mortgage, there's options for insurers. On the multifamily side of things, it's CMHC. And so we say thank you to whatever we are told, and that is it, right? There is no other option. And so that can be a tough pill to swallow, though, when policies are changed overnight, the rules are changed overnight, where you can access your down payment from can be changed. And all of these variables tend to impact the amount of capital you need, to be very honest with you. Every change that they make, it's like, okay, well, now we need X more capital. And so during the process of, you shopping around to getting something under contract and until you have your approval, all of these variables can change. And that can be stressful and difficult to keep up with. So having that broker like a part of the team, we are doing this together, is really critical to keep us on the right path. And then also working with a broker, especially if you want to go CMHC, that does a lot of CMHC transactions, because I've definitely seen different answers depending who it's coming from. So you definitely want to make sure you're working with someone who is doing a lot of CMHC deals. Our largest referral partner on the commercial side of things is Green Birch. They do a large volume of this, and I'm also going to talk about their process later. Make this a whole lot easier and try to reduce those variables for us as early as possible. Okay, so let's talk about what CMHC is there for, and what kind of their role is. So CMHC is the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Their mandate in Canada is to improve the housing situation in this country, essentially. Being the only provider of loan insurance for multi-residential properties, though, means that this gets highly politicized. And I think that, it can be difficult to interpret where things are going too far in advance because of that. So they are the sole insurance company, but their role is really centered around trying to make housing affordable, trying to make it accessible, and trying to make it energy efficient. That's what the MLI Select program was developed for on the multifamily side of things. So that's their role. And the issue with that is that they make the rules, really. We have to abide by whatever the rules are today. And rules are ever changing and changes are immediate. And I'm sure you've heard out there in the marketplace of people, they thought they had an approval, now they don't, now they need to put more money down, now this, now that, right? And the process with CMHC is long, and it really also comes down to the underwriter that you get. So on the residential side of things, it's like, okay, we're going to go buy our home, we're going to go to our bank, they're going to give us this, we can compare it, we can compare with other things, we're going to sign, and then it's done. We know what our mortgage payment's going to look like, we know what our terms are, we know all these things, right? And we know that pretty quick. And that just goes out the window on the multifamily side of things if we're using a CMHC insured mortgage. So why are they so popular right now? And there's posts every single day about the MLI Select program and does it work and why is it popular? So let's like talk about that. So when this program was first introduced, the full MLI Select program, the goal of it was to increase affordability, like I mentioned, increase energy efficiency and accessibility. So what does that translate to in terms of why it's popular? So why it's popular for investors is the first thing there I have written, which is loan to value. And this is 99% of what people are focused on. And it is only one tiny factor of this whole picture. And I don't feel enough light is being shone on the entire thing. So it's popular because if you tell CMHC, okay, I'm going to, give you this amount of units as affordable, I'm going to do XYZ to reach my points. And if you go on the MLI Select program, you'll see on there's a matrix of points that you can achieve depending how many of these things you give CMHC. So it's a give and take kind of thing. The more you give them, the more favorable their amortization will be. They will go up to 50 years, and the more favorable the loan to value will be. So this is where I want to stop. And if the only thing we get out of tonight, this is the most important thing, is loan to value does not mean loan to purchase price. Value is determined, and I'm going to show you an example later of one that I did with Green Birch, but the value is determined by CMHC's valuation. And so how is that done? So let's say we have a deal that we're looking at. We're going to get a high level, look at everything. We're also going to get the full rent roll and expenses and all that. And we're then going to plug that into our own analysis. But CMHC does their own. And so they can influence the numbers to reduce risk. So their valuation often is not necessarily what the purchase price is. And they're doing that to reduce risk, understandably. But what's very misleading about this out in the public is, and I do know a lot of realtors that do this as well, is they say buy a building with 5% down, and that number that should not be used. It's not a down payment. It's a loan to valuation. And so if someone is explaining to you it as a 5% down payment, my instinct is that they don't quite understand what they're talking about. Because is it possible to get 95% loan to value? Yes. But even if you get 95% loan to value, that doesn't mean their value is what your purchase price is or what a fair market value is. So that is a big thing. And it's quite misleading because it's very like rampant out there of consumers and realtors and people using this word of 5% down. And that's not what it means. And very rarely do those make sense, or do they come across the table that actually I would be interested in. So just that's the big thing to remember about loan to value. And to be quite honest with you, if we're talking about new construction, like usually the deals shake out, you're still needing to come up with 15%, let's say, of the purchase price. Even if you only have to put maybe 10 down, because that's how it shakes out, there's still a lot of other costs that come up. And they also don't want to see that you're completely tapped out after your 5%, right? So having access to extra capital is critical. And really wrapping our head around this is how this valuation is made. Even things like vacancy rates. So CMHC publishes annually their vacancy rate schedule for different areas. So for Calgary, you can look up all the different zones and see what the vacancy rate is for a certain area. Let's say you put in an offer in September, and then but you're not getting your actual CMHC certificate of insurance until later in the construction of this project. Maybe now it's July of next year. um, the vacancy rate alone could change your valuation significantly and bring down that loan amount. And so those kind of moving targets are, just because that's what they are today does not necessarily mean that that's what they will be. The other big benefit of CMHC insured mortgages, especially, through COVID times, and we're starting to see this come down a little bit, but given interest rates have been so high, CMHC insured mortgages, the interest rate used is driven by the bond market. Now, I probably should have put up a chart of the bond yield because it's its own roller coaster of its own. However, that's a changing number every moment, right? It's fluctuating all the time. And so in that example of, let's say we're going to buy a new construction eightplex and we did the underwriting on it in September, but it's not ready till July. No one can promise you what the bond rate is going to be next summer. So you got to be very conservative with your numbers. And this is where people are getting caught right now. Changing all of these numbers change the loan value. But generally speaking, in the last, 5 years here, this has made sense. Like the bond rate has been lower than the interest rate you might get on your single family rental property. So, but that's a big one. And if you're the type of person who's like, I need to know to the decimal point what my rate is going to be, you are not going to like this. And yes, you can lock it in as you approach, but they charge you a daily fee to lock it in. So you're not going to lock it in 6 months in advance. That'll kill your deal. So there's some of this that's just like, you do roll the dice a little bit. And of course, there's all kinds of influences in the world that could change the bond rate, but it is a big one that even I saw a post today. What's the interest rate on a MLI Select building? And then they showed it. And this is something that is, under construction and probably will take a year to complete. So in that case, you need to be being very conservative. Run those numbers, worst case scenario. Look at the bond yield and have your best case, worst case, what you can live with case. And if those all don't work, then it probably is not going to make sense. So be very conservative on the rate. Do not just put in one number. You need to be looking at a whole host of variety when it comes to the rate. Um, the other thing, of course, when you're doing a CMHC insured mortgage is the premiums. So the more that you give and take in this space of points, that does change the premium. And I'm going to show you an example of that later. So all those things change: the loan to value, the rate, the amortization. And the other thing is the MLI Full Select program became like the trendy thing everyone was talking about. And there is an MLI standard program, or I think they call it standard or market, depending on the broker. And honestly, it's probably my favorite. They do go up to 85% loan to value and up to 40 years amortization, but you don't have to give those affordability points. Not to say I'm against affordability, but as a realtor and as a salesperson and as an investor, I do think, thinking about opportunities now, people that lock those buildings in for 10 years with affordability, things happen in life. You need to sell, partnerships change, things arise. And you have now made a decision in year one for someone who's going to buy that in year four. And, that might not be the best case scenario for the market at that time. You might have made a future decision that could impact you negatively later. And so just bear in mind, if you are giving it all to this MLI Select program, you are making a decision for 10 years, and with the affordability. And so if for some reason you're like, no, I can't see me holding this that long, then put more money down, have more capital in the deal to give yourself more options. I always like options with real estate. The more options, the better. And a lot of these buildings, a lot of these projects have almost no options now. It's like, this is it. The next owner, if you can sell it, has to assume all of those terms. So bear that in mind out there. But that being said, I do think there could be opportunities as well because of some decisions that were made that now people might need to exit, and you can use that to negotiate as a buyer, right? So buyer seller, depending which hat I'm wearing, is that a pro or a con? So the point system, as I talked about, you can go on there and look it up in terms of the affordability, energy efficiency, accessibility. Even these things are constantly changing in terms of what they will allow, especially on the energy efficiency side. In the beginning of the MLI Sec program, it was probably almost too easy to get the full energy efficiency points. They've scaled that back a bit now. But really understanding, we're talking strategy, what am I trying to do here with this point system? Um, Accessibility is really challenging in terms of what needs to be done, and something I see the least common. But challenges, of course, are around just the ever moving target. It's a constantly changing environment. When it comes to affordability as well, the uh, the rate of affordability, it does change based on the area. So what's affordable in Calgary might be very different than what's affordable in Vancouver versus Toronto or whatever. So on the CMHC website, you can look that up. And what that means is just you cannot be charging rent above the affordability that is set for that city or that market. And so you need to bear that in mind. And then they also determine what rental increase you can have per year as well. So that's already set out for you. If you can have, rental increases in other provinces, it's maybe less impactful. But here in Alberta, that's one of the benefits here is we don't have rent control. So going the full MLI Select program is now you're in full rent control, which if you go to sell that property and someone else doesn't, right, you have maybe limited the pool of your buyers. So those are the challenges. Predictions around CMHC insured. I didn't talk about the construction side of things, but there is a lot, and I mean a lot of these eightplex, tenplex, whatever plex is built with the CMHC construction program under the MLI Select program. And it does do what it's supposed to do on the new construction side. It's the takeout or the after or the buyer or the end user that is going to see significant challenges. And already is, and you're seeing that people not having the net worth requirements or their loan to value changing, because the issue with construction is your CMHC insured certificate of insurance. So if you want to get a CMHC insured mortgage for your project, you're going to get your certificate of insurance, but it's only valid for 6 months. So if something is under construction and, in that example where I wrote a contract in September, I removed conditions, it's not complete till next summer. I likely removed conditions without that because it's a little too early, right? So two things there is always having a backup plan if you do not get your CMHC insured financing. But the big one that people are getting hit with is what they thought they would need to close in terms of cash to close has changed massively. The environment has changed, the policies have changed, and you're seeing people having to either walk away from their deposits, which could lead to, lawsuits. You're seeing people needing to add partners or sell or whatever. So these kind of urgent things are coming up because as construction is completing, the deal is not looking like what they thought it would, and they either can't close, they can't complete for whatever reason. They don't have the additional cash needed. We've done 3 of these now with the WellShare team, and every single time we need to come up with more cash than what we thought. And so having extra capital available, really, really critical. But for the, buyers out there, there could be some good opportunities coming now into next year as problem solvers because things have changed and they just don't work for the initial buyer anymore because they, don't have the solutions to whatever the new problem is. So just a quick review of some, the key misconceptions. Number one is the big one. I kind of want to have flags and shirts made of this. That the loan to value does not mean loan to purchase price. And if you're working with a realtor or a team or someone that is not speaking this language, then maybe this is not their specialty. This is really critical. The MLS like program, of course, eyes wide open there. Think about the options. It does not hurt to put more money down. You don't necessarily need to push everything to the max lending limit just because you can either. Maybe you don't want to give up. You don't want to give up so much control just to get that extra, loan to value out. We talked about the COI process a little bit. But I want to highlight buy downs on rates here. So, and this is happening a lot too, is in that example where we're buying something new construction, and I keep going back to this because it's popular. In that example, I told you that no one can promise you your interest rate next year, right? However, in the meantime, while that's getting built, we're going to start our process with our mortgage broker. We're going to apply to get our certificate of insurance. Then we're going to get our certificate of insurance. And hopefully that's in a good timeline that works with your closing. But on the certificate of insurance, there's going to be a ceiling rate of what your interest rate can be or what the bond rate can be at that time. And this is another example of bring more money because if the bond rate spikes above what's in your ceiling rate on your certificate of insurance, two things. You need to make sure that you have a lender on board that will allow you to buy down a rate. And number two is you need to have the money to buy down the rate. And so these can be large expenses right before closing because you weren't anticipating to have to buy down the rate. But think about all the world influencers that can affect the bond market. So always, always, always have extra capital available for something like this. Rate buy down is a big one that people aren't thinking of. And then it's like, oh crap, I got to buy down this rate in the next 2 weeks. And then what, right? So, and number four, just always have access to capital, extra access to capital. If you're like, I have a couple $100,000 and want to get into the multifamily space, it is not enough, in my opinion. You do need to have or be partnering with other people and pooling your capital together, which is really common because all of those variables will require you to come up with more cash. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about strategy here on the multifamily side. I talked a lot about the new builds, but I also want to talk about resale. So, new builds are popular because there's less variables and they like that it's new and it competes well out on the rental market as well because tenants also love new properties. So it is desirable from that sense. The one-step financing plan, notice how I said possible. Your strategy likely will be with a new build is to go straight to CMHC insured mortgages. You're going to get your COI, you're going to get a lender on board, and that's going to be your one-step financing plan. Where that can go wrong is when the timelines don't line up to what's completion for your project. I've heard about people's certificate of insurance expiring. And then when your certificate of insurance expires, you got to go back to the bottom of the pile with CMHC. So now what? Now you're not going to get your CMHC new certificate of insurance for, let's say, a few months, and you got to close in 30 days. So what do you do? So even on the new build side, you always have to have the backup plan for financing. What is my worst case scenario, and can I live with it? So with our teams that we work with on the financing side of things, that's something I'm always mentioning is what's plan B, because I know things don't always just work out how we want them to. So having that and know that it is possible if you go for one of these new build properties that you will end up with a two-step, which means you're going to close with a bridge loan. It's going to cost you more money than you're comfortable with, and it's going to be a higher interest rate for a short period of time while you're getting your CMHC insured mortgage in place. So it's possible, but there's no guarantees. There's just no guarantees with that. Now, if it's already built, existing, and you have the time, then obviously that's a very different situation. Here I'm referring to when it's actually under construction and we have to build it. So risks in all of that is all of those items changing, all of the vacancy rates changing, interest rates changing, timelines changing, your certificate of insurance expiring is a big one, and the potential to have to buy down your interest rate. That's a big one as well. And the other crazy thing is not all lenders will even allow you to do that. Some of them don't allow a rate buy down. So I've seen, and we've had to do it too, where you have to switch lenders because they won't allow you to buy down the rate, which means a huge panic right before closing, right? Benefits, of course, are being able to maximize those energy efficiency things on the MLS like program. Less work, of course. They are new, attractive. When it comes to maintaining them, insuring them, attracting tenants, all those good things. Now, on the resale side of things, the BRRRR potential in multifamily, especially here in Alberta, if we're talking about strategy, is massive. BRRRR, obviously, we're familiar on the residential side. We're going to buy something, we're going to renovate it, we're going to rent it out, we're going to refinance it, we're going to repeat. But in multifamily, why it is so lucrative here in Alberta is because you can basically turn over an entire building in, 12 to 18 months, let's say even under 2 years. That might take you 10 years to do in Ontario. And the reason for that is our landlord legislation. So whether you have fixed term tenancies in place or month-to-month tenancies, if you're doing renovations, you have a reason to turn the tenant over. And so that multiplier effect can happen real quick. So being able to do that here in Alberta, that pays off relatively quickly. And you want it to be done quickly because you want to get to your second step of your financing, back to the financing strategy, right? So you want to get the bird, you want to get the work done as quickly as possible. You want to get it stabilized and looking nice and shiny for CMHC, and then do your refinance. And the multiplier effect is pretty substantial. Like every $50 matters. Every $50 can equate to over $20,000 of valuation on your net operating income. So every dollar really, really matters and it goes really far. But the big thing here and big underline is there's more variables, right? There's a lot more steps involved. There's a lot more financing steps and a lot more things that can go wrong. But if you want a project and you're like really dedicated in this space and you are looking for this, then there's massive opportunity here. And I would also say in the last couple of years, most investors are just looking for the new and shiny things, and it's not nearly as competitive on the resale. Now, one con of the resales, you're often dealing, if especially if it's an older property, you might not have the best paperwork. You might have, you know, chicken scratch financials. You might have the same gentleman who's been managing it for 25 years and he's friends with all his tenants, and deals in cash, So it is a different world, and we could talk about that for a whole hour, but the opportunity is definitely there, but you have to be more comfortable with the more variables and the more risk. Okay, we're going to review this and then I'm going to bring up I want to show you an example. Yeah. So the experience on the multifamily commercial side of things. Now, the big one is build your team. Everyone always says that always, but truly on this side of it, for us to do our job well in this space, we need to work as a team. We need to be working together. It requires a lot more kind of dedication as a group that we're going to move in the same direction here. So building your team, and that includes the mortgage broker, and don't keep them separate. We do our best job when we are working with the mortgage broker. We're all working together in the same direction. Obviously, getting pre-approved. This is a big one too, is people think, well, I don't got to get pre-approved. No, you still need to get pre-approved. And yes, the financing is reliant on the building, but they definitely still care about you and your finances. And really what they're going to care about is your net worth. So just a quick calculation at a bare minimum, whatever loan amount you want at a minimum, and it might want more, you need to show a 25% net worth calculation for that amount of a loan. So if I want a $10 million mortgage, I need to prove at least $2.5 million of net worth on me. And you will be asked to guarantee the debt as well. So understand that financing space. And this is where a lot of people have to partner too, because we all only have so much net worth. And so having net worth partners is a thing as well. And just making sure that whatever you want to do is in line with what you can get approved for. Setting up your structure, this is a big one, and this goes hand in hand with the raising capital. I could talk for an hour on that as well, and maybe we'll do that in the new year on the raising capital side of things. But you need to understand this inside out and backwards before your lender and broker and realtor and everyone else can understand it. So we need to know what the plan is, what kind of structure you're using, and we can help, guide you with getting you set up with the right people, but making sure this is sort of thought of in advance. There's always the argument of deal before money if you're going to raise money. And certainly you can raise money once you find the deal, but um, that works really well for people who have a really big established network of investors already. If we're newer to this space, that's going to be much harder for you to do than someone who's done this, 10, 15 times. So I'm a big believer of having a good sense of where the capital is coming from ahead of time, because you might just waste all your time and waste expenses and all of that, and that's not going to help you get to your goals. So viewing, this is a big one that's always surprising to people is if you find something you're interested in and you call me up and you go, you want to go look at it. Often in Calgary, the answer is no. If there's a vacant unit, they might let us go look at that. We can obviously look at the outside. Sometimes the common areas we'll be able to do, but most often they don't want to be parading groups of people through. These are people's homes and we want to respect that. So a viewing is generally the first condition of our offer. So what we get is a one-page flyer that definitely will not be 100% of the information you want to see, but it gives us just a snapshot. And most often there's things in there that are not accurate, to be very honest with you as well. But we are getting a flyer. We're going to take a look at the numbers, make sure that makes sense for us. And then we're going to likely write an offer, and there'll be multiple stages of conditions. And the very first one will be viewing. We want to view the units, or the majority of them at least, within that first week or so, depending however long it takes them to kind of get going. So viewing is a very different process, and just knowing what to expect there is very different on the residential side. When we drive around and we go look at all the things and take all the photos and do all the things, we're not doing that on this side of it. And so you just got to be okay with that. But your offer process, we could talk strategy on that for quite a long time as well, but there's a lot of strategy that goes into how we design our timelines, our condition dates, and what we're asking for at what time. And oftentimes we don't want to get too stuck on the price at the very beginning, because most likely something is going to come up that we're going to have to renegotiate because we haven't seen it yet. We don't know what we're doing yet. So at the very beginning, don't even worry about spending too much energy on, getting really crazy on the negotiation side, because we don't know what we don't know yet. And we got to go find out what we don't know. Then we can come back and go, well, this is not what your flyer said. This photo was taken 20 years ago, or whatever it might be, right? So there's stages of this and a lot of strategy that goes into it. And that's what we will help you with when we're talking about the actual offer process. Okay. I know I'm like almost at the top of the hour here, but I'm just going to stop sharing while I pull up the Green Birch underwriting thing that I wanted to show you guys. But was there any questions, Andrea, that came through while I was doing that, or anything I missed?
I think you have covered any of the questions that came up, and Monique was helping out in the chat too. So
Oh,
thanks,
awesome.
Monique. Monique has lots of experience to speak on from there too. So that's great.
That's great. Is this helpful? Refunding, learning some things?
If there are any other questions that are coming up, for sure put them in the chat too, and we can try to get to those as well.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Got signed out of my Google Drive. Okay. So, in thinking about the process while I'm pulling this up and looking for this, now everyone has their own idea of how they like to do things. when you say to us, hey, I want to, explore this opportunity, as I said, we're going to get that flyer. And if you're interested in it, my opinion is we send it to the underwrite to the mortgage broker to do some underwriting on it immediately before we even write an offer. And that is something that is a little different than on the residential side. Now, not all mortgage brokers are going to do what I'm about to show you, but I think it is very difficult for us to do our job to be able to make an offer without this. And this is the level of detail that I would want to see as your realtor working alongside with you, or if I was buying this myself. So they do a couple things. And what I like to see is I'm going to try to make this bigger. And obviously, I can send this out. Now, the example I'm going to show you, I've used it as an example for quite some time. It's over a year old. And it's not about the deal, it's about what's in it and what I want you to see. So they do an initial underwriting for our clients. And there's 3 documents here. It's going to be hard to see all the numbers. We're not going to go through it all. What I want us to highlight here is number one is if we're making an initial offer, we want to know, like, is the price ridiculous? Is it good? Is it like we don't necessarily know yet because we haven't put all this in a analyzer yet, and Greenbirch will help us with that. So what they're going to do is a few things. They're going to first do an initial analysis. So remember how we talked about the valuation is based off of all of the numbers, right? So our income, our expenses, and then we're going to tell Greenbirch this is new construction, we're going to buy it as is, or if we're doing a 2-step BRRRR, we're going to tell them here's the current rents, we're going to spend, $25,000 a unit, and then we're going to raise our rents to this. And they'll do this for both of those steps right from the beginning. So right from the beginning, we at least know if we're like on the right track of this making sense. And that is really important, in my opinion, for us to even consider looking at it. So what this does, now this I said it was a little 5-plex. This was new construction property. So what they're doing is we are putting in the rent, any fees we're charging, we are getting in all of our expenses. So we talked about vacancy. And just a little note about vacancy too is the CMHC insured underwriter that gets you assigned. This is also at their discretion. So if they feel this community or this area has not enough rental data to support the vacancy because it's brand new, they may go, well, yes, for Calgary, we're using this, but we don't have enough data or history. So we're actually going to increase it because we're a little nervous about it. So all of these numbers are not set in stone, even from the mortgage brokers. Just because the mortgage broker says it, until the underwriter says it with CMHC, it's not set. Okay. They're just going to do the best they can with what they have today. So all of these things are going to get inputted. You'll see under the operating expenses, obviously taxes and insurance are projected, but maintenance, repair, salaries, management, all of these things, those are figures established by CMHC, and these percentages have changed since this is done. So don't worry about those, but the concept is the same. And you might go, well, why do I need salaries on a 5-plex? Well, too bad. It's going to be accounted for. So whether you have it or not is irrelevant. This is how CMHC is going to look at it. And so all of these expenses, as I said, of course, will impact what our loan amount will be. So on this initial document, it's giving us a high level look at rents, expenses, how CMHC will look at it in terms of their expenses and vacancy. And then it's going to give us a couple of things. One is, so the appraisal valuation in this scenario came out at 2.9 million. The purchase price at the time that they were asking was 2.8. So that's good. It isn't a huge variable, but if the appraisal came out at 2.6, well, we got a problem. This isn't making sense right away, right? So just a quick glance, that's all we're looking for at this point is we want to make sure, does this make sense? Now, there will be a conversation about cap rate that always comes up, and it's usually the first thing people ask about is what cap rate, is good for this, good for X, or good for this area. And the thing to understand about cap rate is it's to an appraiser as well. There is some massaging there that can happen. It is only one of the factors. It is one of them, but it is not like it isn't one that we just want to look at and just not look at anything else. So don't get too hung up on the cap rate, but you'll also see they'll use a high and a low as well. So, and the team can help guide us on that as well when we do this. So, okay, so this told us roughly, okay, the valuation is in line with reality. Thank goodness, that's great. Then they're going to give us another document here. And there could be several of these, depending on the amount of financing we are looking for them to do. But what I love about this is what Green Birch does is so they did that appraisal, and then this is going to be put into what most people are really looking for, which is what how will CMHC MLI Select program come out? How will it look? And as you can see, I know this chart is hard to see, but what I want to point out to you is how much on the very right the equity requirement changes depending on which points we give CMHC, depending on like if we want to give them 50 affordability points or 100, right? That changes everything. It changes the loan amount significantly, changes the premiums, changes your debt coverage ratio, which I didn't even have time to go into tonight. But my point with all of this is the equity requirement is significantly impacted by which variable we change, right? So when someone goes, well, it's 5% down, it's like no, it's not that black and white, and it never will be because all of these variables can change, and depending what you take and what you get, depending what the interest rate ceiling is, as we talked about, depending which points you give them, all of those things are really going to impact our equity requirement. And in this specific example, I think the lowest equity down payment is 173,000, and the highest is over 600,000. So this is why when I see 5% down on a purchase price, I kind of like get frustrated because it's not that simple. And so this is really what I want to highlight with this. But I think this level of detail gives us a pretty good indication before we make an offer if we're on the right track, if things are making sense, and if this property works for the type of financing that you want to do. Because everyone has their own goals on that. Lots of people do not play around with CMHC at all. They go, no, I just want conventional or whatever, right? So there's no right or wrong, but this I'm highlighting this because this is the most common thing everyone's talking about right now.
Natasha, there was a
Yeah,
question in the chat, I guess, speaking
yeah,
on that, in terms of like CMHC versus conventional, maybe like high level, someone asking like, what is the difference? Or, is there kind of pro or
yeah.
cons for each?
That's a great point. The issue with conventional is your interest rate is not bond rates. So we're talking about regular interest rates that you see out there. So historically, in the last, 5 years, that's made it challenging. Prior to that, when interest rates were very low, the numbers actually worked decently well to use conventional financing. So, and they do not go up to the 50-year amortization. You're talking about a 25-year amortization, possibly 30, but you're definitely not going up to 50. So what that means is harder to make cash flow because you don't have that amortization period that's really long, and potentially higher interest rates. Now, as interest rates start coming down, though, we're going to start seeing this like crossover period where it's making more sense to go conventional, not play in this pond of CMHC. And the benefits are good in that you can get an approval in like 30 days. You're not waiting months and months, and there's just less variables to be impacted. So less variables, it'll be more akin to what you're used to on residential side of things. But making the numbers work has been challenging. Any other questions on this? If anyone wants me to send this just to like review, happy to. I have other examples as well. I just for some reason always have this one up. I'm gonna stop share. Okay, I feel like I went through a lot there. Any questions? Any thoughts, questions, concerns? Yeah, Monique dislikes cap rate. So Monique is the CFO of Wellshare, and it's something that comes up a lot is cap rate. And she does say you can use it to your advantage because, as I said, when the appraisal comes in, it's not a set, oh, we're going to use 5%. That number could swing a little bit. So it's not black and white. That's all. Thanks, Roy. I guess to kind of wrap it up, oh, there's one from Nadia here. Is there a way where a property is purchased with conventional and for yes, absolutely. Well, where that's common as well is if you're doing a BRRRR or a rehab or some type of improvement to a property where you might go with a conventional mortgage. Where people usually get caught up with that is especially if the property is underperforming. An underperforming building means the valuation is going to come in low, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean the seller is going to let it go low. And it doesn't mean it's necessarily worth that. It could have really good land, it could have really good opportunity with it, and it's just underperforming. So in that scenario, you might go conventional or just, kind of plan to suck that up for a year or two or something, and then go to a CMHC insured mortgage. But typically, a CMHC insured mortgage, you wouldn't go from CMHC to conventional because very likely you're going to have to put more down. So more goes the other way if you're going from a conventional mortgage over to CMHC. And then the goal there is you're trying to pull out capital, just like a BRRRR on a primary home, right? Or on a single family home. So that's generally the way you would go. On some of those underperforming properties, usually where kind of the hiccup can be like, well, we need to put like 35% down to get the conventional mortgage to get approval. But that's part of your calculations, right? You're going, okay, my carrying costs are going to be, yes, the debt service coverage ratio as well changes. Um, your your carrying costs during that time, if you're doing a BRRRR, would be calculated as just part of the cost of doing it, right? But you got to make sure you're accounting for it because they will be different than when you move over to your CMHC. What opportunities do you see over the next 6 months? I'm quite excited about 2026. I think 2025, we saw kind of the peak of things a little bit in this space. And well, just the market in general. I'm talking about Alberta. I'm not going to talk about the other provinces. But I think there will be opportunities. I think there is going to be, and there is already happening for buyers. Being problem solvers is going to be the way to come to the table on the new construction side. Being a net worth partner, being able to close quick. The A lot of those new construction projects, as we just discussed, were valued at the highest rent in Alberta's history in quite some time. So if you did your numbers based on rent from 2020, January 2025 or even 2024, on paper you're going to think your building is worth X, but then it's going to complete, it's going to be built, and the new appraisal is going to show projected rent probably significantly lower than that, right? And so maybe it's $150 a door lower or 200 a door lower, or whatever. Next thing you know, the deal doesn't work. Because if the valuation comes in low, that buyer is going to have to come up with more cash. So either that means the deal will collapse altogether, and then the builder will want to get rid of it, and there could be a good buying opportunity, or there's a good opportunity to come in as a problem solver there for the first buyer. So I think there's going to be a bit of reality check happening. I think a lot of people went really fast with this MLI Select program, not understanding what maybe they were quite getting themselves into and didn't have the backup plans in place for that. And so on the new build side of things, I think being able to close quickly is going to be a huge benefit, and being able to be kind of like nimble there will be good, but be conservative always. And then on the resale side of things, like there's opportunities out there in terms of these just properties that are just ready for a new owner, right? They're not as sexy. They're not the same as the HGTV thing that we're all excited about, but there's good money to be made there, and so I do think those will continue. And now that the height of the market is behind us, sellers are moving into next year, and we're moving into more like a balanced market condition. I think the numbers are going to make even a whole lot more sense for us on that side of things. So be conservative. The other thing is for Edmonton and Calgary, whether we're talking about single family or multifamily or um, being smart about the location is critical. There's a lot of people who made a lot of decisions, like I said, when the rental market was super hot. And there's a building in Eau Claire that keeps getting sent to me to look at. It's 80 some units in Eau Claire, downtown Calgary, right off the river, beautiful spot. Um, the developers from Toronto built a really nice project. It has no parking, not one parking spot at all. And I know, as being a landlord for over 20 years in Calgary, yeah, that's great. Last year, when the rental market was amazing and his numbers look great, but I also know that in a year from now, his valuation is going to be significantly lower because there's no way he's going to be able to maintain those rental rates into slower markets. So that's where the opportunities start to come, right? Um, and so just being, patient is an opportunity. These things, these types of deals take time. And, there's one group that we've been talking with for over a year now. And, our number is the same as it was then, if not a little lower now, but they're so far out to lunch because everyone was using these high market numbers, right? So as rents come down, reality is going to sink in and the appraisals will start supporting the numbers that you probably want to see anyway. And so then these sellers are going to have to take a bit of a, either go back to being a long-term buy and hold approach and get off the market or come into reality and start coming in as problem solvers, which could also mean things like creative financing, creative deals. Um, Creative deals are harder on the like sixplexes. I get asked about them a lot, but to be quite honest with you, they do happen more the larger the deals get. Because with a sixplex, like the seller could just have someone come in and pay cash or put a residential mortgage on it. So they're, I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just they're just not as common. But if you start getting up to, larger buildings, they do become a little more common. So in that example, a good opportunity could be someone who really wants last year's prices, in 2026. Maybe, the two offer strategy will be interesting where, okay, I'll give you a bit more, but you're going to loan me half my, capital requirement or whatever it is, right? VTBs. The seller then becomes part of the solution. And then how does it become a win-win? So those are the kind of opportunities I see. I do think in the long run, Calgary and Alberta is still sitting really like strongly. I think there's a lot of great economic indicators, but things were just too tight, right? And one thing Alberta does very well is build stuff, and that's good and bad in that we pivot and change really quick to demand. But that also means you got to be careful that you're not getting caught at that wrong time and thinking this is going to last forever, like this Toronto developer, I believe, did. So we don't want to. We just want to make sure we're, eyes wide open always, and looking in areas in both of the major markets in Alberta that do well, no matter all of this, right? But overall, I see good, steady growth for Alberta, and I'm really excited for what the future has to hold. But we got to be smart, we got to be conservative. So hopefully that helps. Awesome. If you are here or you're watching the replay and you're interested in working with us, we absolutely want to work with you. Reach out to us for an initial consult, and we will get started and let you know how we work and what the process is. But I hope everybody learned a little something and that it was valuable this evening. And I just thank everybody for coming.